I'll never forget the look on his face when the waiter handed him my note. Pure panic washed over him like a tidal wave, his copper-colored eyes widening to the size of saucers. If the Academy Awards were given for best performance by a cheating husband caught red-handed, he would have swept every category that night. Enjoy your dinner. I hope it tastes as good as the lie you told me this morning. That's all I wrote, 15 words that shattered the careful facade he'd built. 15 words that changed everything. Let me back up a little. I'm his wife, and until 3 hours before that moment, I was just a trusting wife who thought her 10-year marriage was rock solid. I was the woman who believed her husband when he said he had an emergency meeting that evening. The same woman who accidentally ran into a longtime friend at the mall, who looked at me with that unmistakable pity in her eyes when she said, "I'm so sorry." She continued, "I saw him making reservations at Bellini's for tonight." He wasn't alone. I remember standing there frozen, as if someone had just told me gravity no longer existed. The shopping bag suddenly felt too heavy in my hands. My world tilted sideways. "Are you sure it was him?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. She wouldn't make this up. "Positive." "I didn't want to be the one to tell you, but I couldn't let you not know." I drove home in a daze, my mind racing through recent months, the late nights, the sudden business trips, the new cologne, the password on his phone that hadn't been there before. Classic signs I'd ignored because I couldn't bear the alternative. I called Bellini's, putting on my sweetest voice. "Hi, I'd like to confirm my husband's reservation for tonight." "Yes, table for 2 at 8 p.m. Would you like to add any special requests?" "Table for 2. The confirmation hit me like a punch to the gut. "No, that's all. Thank you." I hung up and stared at my reflection in the hallway mirror, barely recognizing the woman looking back at me. She looked hollow, betrayed. But beneath the hurt, I saw something else emerging: determination. I spent the afternoon in a strange, detached state. I showered. I chose my outfit carefully, a black dress he'd never seen before. Elegant but understated. I did my makeup impeccably. If I was going to confront my husband and his mistress, I wasn't going to look like I'd been crying, even though inside I was shattered. I arrived at Bellini's at 7:45 p.m. and asked for a table with a view of the entire restaurant. The maitre d' seated me in a perfect spot. I could see everyone, but unless someone was specifically looking for me, I remained relatively hidden behind a decorative column. At precisely 8:03 p.m., he walked in. My husband of 10 years. The man who kissed me goodbye that morning with a promise to be home early was straightening his tie nervously. And then she appeared beside him. I felt the air leave my lungs. She was beautiful. Tall. Blonde. Probably early 30s. She wore a red dress that hugged every curve, and his hand rested on the small of her back in a gesture of intimate familiarity that made my stomach turn. I'd never seen her before, but from their easy manner with each other, this clearly wasn't their first dinner together. They were seated at a table across the restaurant, bathed in candlelight. I watched as they ordered drinks, their heads close together, laughing at private jokes. He reached across the table to take her hand, bringing it to his lips, a gesture he once reserved for me. The diamond tennis bracelet on her wrist caught the light, a bracelet that looked suspiciously like the one missing from our joint credit card statement last month. The business expense he'd explained away so smoothly. Every cell in my body wanted to march over there, flip their table, and create the scene this betrayal deserved. But something deeper, something colder, took over. I signaled my waiter. "Do you see that couple over there? The man in the blue suit." The waiter nodded discreetly. "I'd like you to deliver a note to him. Just him. And if possible, I'd like to watch his reaction." The waiter, bless him, seemed to understand immediately. The knowing look in his eyes told me this wasn't the first time he'd been enlisted in such delicate matters. "Of course. I'd be happy to assist." I took the small notepad from my purse and wrote those 15 fateful words. Folded the paper neatly. Handed it to the waiter with a generous tip. What happened next felt like watching a movie in slow motion. The waiter approached their table, leaned down, and discreetly placed the folded note beside his plate. "For you, sir," I saw him say. He looked confused, then unfolded the paper. I watched as his face transformed, confusion to recognition to horror, in the span of 3 seconds. His head snapped up, eyes frantically scanning the restaurant. The woman across from him was saying something, clearly concerned by his sudden change in demeanor. His hands trembled so badly he knocked over his water glass. The woman reached out to steady him, but he pulled away, still desperately searching the room. That's when I stood up and let him see me. Our eyes met across the crowded restaurant. In that moment, I felt something break permanently inside me. But also something else being born, something stronger. I didn't cause a scene. I didn't rush over. I simply raised my glass in a mock toast, held his gaze for 10 excruciating seconds, and then turned and walked out of the restaurant with my head held high. The night air hit my face as I stepped outside, and only then did I allow the first tear to fall. He didn't come home that night. I sat in our darkened living room until 3 a.m., rehearsing what I would say when he finally showed his face. The anger I'd felt in the restaurant had crystallized into something harder, colder, more dangerous. My phone buzzed constantly with his messages. Please, let me explain. It's not what you think. I made a terrible mistake. Please answer your phone. I love you. Only you. Each text message felt like salt in an open wound. 10 years of marriage reduced to desperate clichés typed with trembling thumbs. Around 4 a.m. I finally fell into a restless sleep on the couch. I woke to the sound of keys in the door at dawn. He looked terrible, unshaven, shirt wrinkled, eyes bloodshot. He froze when he saw me sitting there, as if he'd expected me to be gone. Maybe he'd hoped I would be. He started, his voice breaking. Who is she? My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Calm. Too calm. She's nobody. Just someone from work. It didn't mean anything. I laughed then, a harsh, brittle sound that seemed to physically hurt him. Hold up, before we go any further, if this story has you hooked, do me a quick favor. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment below. Have you ever been in a situation like this? I want to hear your thoughts. Alright, let's get back to it. Try again. The bracelet you bought her looks exactly like the one I pointed out at Tiffany's for our anniversary, the one you said was too expensive for me. His face crumbled. I can explain that. How long? He stared at the floor. 6 months. 6 months. Half a year of lies. While I was planning our vacation to the Amalfi Coast. While I was nursing him through that flu in February. While I was organizing his surprise birthday party. He was with her. Do you love her? The question burned my throat. His hesitation told me everything. I don't know what I feel anymore. Something inside me hardened further. Well, that makes 2 of us. What followed was the kind of argument that changes you forever. The kind where truths long buried rise to the surface like corpses in a flood. You've been distant for years, he accused. Always busy with your career. Never making time for us. Don't you dare turn this around on me, I fired back. I built my career while still remembering your mother's birthday every year, and making sure we had dinner together 4 nights a week. I made time. You just didn't want it. It's not that simple. It is that simple. You made thousands of tiny choices that led you to her bed. Each one was a betrayal. Hour after exhausting hour, we stripped away the veneer of our marriage, exposing the rot underneath. The respect I once had for him disintegrated with each pathetic excuse, each blame-shifting comment. I never meant to hurt you, he said finally, when there was nothing left to say. That's the worst part, I replied. You never even considered me enough to think about whether I'd be hurt. He moved into the guest room that day. We existed in a Cold War state for 2 weeks, passing like ghosts in our own home, communicating only when absolutely necessary. I watched him watching me, waiting for me to break down, to beg him to work things out, to suggest counseling. That's what the old me would have done. But this new version of me was different. This version was quietly gathering information. I found her name in his phone, an executive at a competing firm. I discovered their text history went back nearly a year, not 6 months. I uncovered hidden apps on his phone where they'd exchanged messages and photos I wish I could unsee. I found hotel receipts, dinner charges, weekend getaways carefully disguised as business trips. The betrayal was more comprehensive than I'd imagined. More deliberate. More cruel. I learned that he told her I was cold. Unloving. Career-obsessed. That our marriage had been over in all but name for years. That he was just waiting for the right time to leave me. The night I discovered this last piece of information, I finally broke down. Not quiet tears, but gut-wrenching sobs that left me gasping for air, curled up on the bathroom floor. I cried for the woman I had been, trusting, devoted, blind. I cried for the future I thought we had. I cried until there was nothing left. And then, in that strange empty space that follows complete emotional collapse, clarity arrived. This wasn't just about infidelity. This was about my dignity, my self-worth, my future. The next morning he found me at the kitchen table, calmly drinking coffee. He approached cautiously, like someone approaching a wild animal. "I've been thinking, maybe we could try counseling." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not the man I'd loved for a decade, but a stranger. A coward who'd lived a double life and was now scrambling to maintain his comfortable existence. "I think it's too late for that," I said quietly. "Please don't make any rash decisions," he pleaded. "I've ended things with her. Completely. I want to make this work with you." I almost felt sorry for him then. Almost. "Tell me something. Did you end things with her because you realized you love me? Or because you're afraid of losing half of everything you own?" His hesitation was my answer. "That's what I thought." I stood up, taking my coffee cup to the sink. "By the way, she called the house last night. Apparently she's not as convinced as you are that things are over." The color drained from his face. "What? When? What did she say?" "Oh, we had quite the illuminating conversation," I replied, enjoying the panic in his eyes. "She seems to think you two had some kind of future planned. Funny, since you just told me you ended things." "She's lying." "Save it." I raised my hand. "You know what's interesting? She didn't know I existed." "Not really. You told her we were separated. Living separate lives under one roof, waiting for the right time to file for divorce." He sank into a chair, head in his hands. "I can explain." "You've explained enough." I moved toward the door, grabbing my purse. "I'm going out. Don't wait up." As I closed the door behind me, I heard the sound of something shattering against the wall, the beginning of his realization that this time, his charm and excuses wouldn't save him. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. What they don't tell you is how much preparation goes into creating that perfect ice-cold serving. While he thought I was falling apart, I was methodically putting together the pieces of my new life, and his undoing. First, I contacted my college roommate, who had become one of Seattle's most ruthless divorce attorneys. We met for lunch at a small cafe far from my usual haunts. "You need to document everything," she advised over salads we both merely picked at. "Bank statements, credit card records, text messages, anything that shows the timeline and extent of his affair. Washington is a no-fault state, but evidence of infidelity can influence property division if you can prove he used marital assets to fund the affair." I smiled faintly. "Like a $12,000 tennis bracelet." "Exactly like that," she nodded approvingly. "And don't move out of the house. No matter how uncomfortable it gets. It can complicate property claims." That evening, I created a new email account and began forwarding myself screenshots, photos of receipts, and bank statements. I was building my case meticulously. Every night after he fell asleep, I'd slip into his home office and photograph documents, download statements, copy files. I discovered offshore accounts I never knew existed, investments made without my knowledge. A pattern of financial deception that paralleled his emotional betrayal. But the most important discovery came 3 weeks after the restaurant incident. While searching through old tax documents in our storage room, I found a folder labeled Meridian Acquisition Private. Inside was a series of documents outlining his plan to orchestrate a hostile takeover of a smaller firm, Meridian Technologies, using insider information obtained through his relationship with her, who worked for Meridian's parent company. I sat back on my heels, heart pounding. This wasn't just infidelity. This was corporate espionage, potentially illegal activity that could destroy not just our marriage, but his career and reputation. I carefully photographed every page, then returned the folder exactly as I'd found it. The next day, I called my brother who worked for the SEC. "I need hypothetical legal advice," I said when he answered. "Those are my favorite kinds of conversations with family members," he replied dryly. "Go on." I outlined the situation without names, describing the documents I'd found. His voice grew serious. "If what you're describing is accurate, this person could be facing serious securities fraud charges. The SEC takes this kind of insider trading extremely seriously." What kind of penalties are we talking about? Substantial fines. Potentially criminal charges depending on the extent. Definite end of career in finance. Possible jail time. He paused. Why are you asking these very specific hypothetical questions? Just research for novel I'm thinking about writing, I lied smoothly. Thanks for the insight. With this new information, I began constructing a three-pronged plan. First, financial protection. I quietly moved half of our joint savings into a new account in my name only, an amount I could legally justify as my portion of marital assets. I consulted with a financial advisor about protecting my own investments and credit. Second, professional leverage. I compiled a dossier of his corporate espionage activities, not to submit to authorities yet, but to hold in reserve. My nuclear option. Third, and this was the part that gave me a grim satisfaction, I arranged to meet her. I chose a quiet hotel bar downtown. Neutral territory. She arrived 15 minutes late, sliding into the booth across from me with a mixture of defiance and curiosity on her face. I wasn't sure I should come, she said, signaling the waiter for a drink. Yet here you are, I replied, studying her up close. She looked younger. Her confidence more fragile than it had appeared in the restaurant. What do you want? To threaten me? Tell me to stay away from your husband. There was a challenge in her voice, but also uncertainty. I smiled slightly. Actually, I wanted to thank you. That caught her off guard. Thank me? For showing me who he really is before I wasted any more of my life on him. I took a sip of my martini. How much has he told you about our marriage? She shifted uncomfortably. He said it was over in all but name. That you two were basically roommates. That you were focused on your career and didn't care about him anymore. I nodded. And the separate bedrooms? The impending divorce? Let me guess, just waiting for the right time. A flicker of doubt crossed her face. Yes. Did you know we renewed our vows last year in Hawaii? That we were trying for a baby this spring? These weren't true. But I needed to see her reaction. Her face paled. That can't be right. I pulled out my phone, showing her photos of our recent anniversary dinner, the weekend trip to Vancouver 2 months ago, the Christmas card where we looked every bit the happy couple. He's lied to both of us, I said. The difference is, I'm done believing him. She stared at the photos, then raised her eyes to mine. Why are you showing me this? What do you want? I leaned forward. I want you to understand who you're really involved with, not just a cheater, but someone who uses people. You don't know anything about our relationship, she said defensively, but her voice wavered. I know he's using information you provide about Meridian to orchestrate a takeover that will likely result in mass layoffs, including probably yours. I kept my voice matter-of-fact, watching the shock spread across her face. That's not, he wouldn't. He would. And he is. I've seen the documents. I took another sip of my drink. I'm not here to fight with you over him. You can have him, though I suspect he'll discard you too, once he's gotten what he wants. I'm here because women should warn each other about predators. Her hand trembled as she reached for her wine glass. I need to think. This is a lot to process. Take all the time you need. I placed a business card on the table between us. My private number is on the back. Call me when you're ready to talk more. As I stood to leave, she looked up at me, confusion and anger warring in her expression. Why would you help me? I considered this for a moment. Because he hurt both of us. And because I believe in karma. Walking out of that bar, I felt a strange sense of power returning. Not the desperate anger of betrayal, but something steadier, more purposeful. That night, I slept soundly for the first time in weeks. He noticed the change in me the next morning, eyeing me suspiciously over breakfast. You seem different, he ventured. I smiled enigmatically. Do I? I hadn't noticed. He studied my face, trying to read what was happening behind my eyes. I've been thinking a lot about us. About what happened. Save it for someone who still cares. I cut him off. Gently. Almost kindly. I have a busy day ahead. As I walked out the door, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. Shoulders back. Head high. A glint of determination in my eyes. The woman looking back at me wasn't broken anymore. She was ready. 3 days later, my phone rang with an unknown number. When I answered, her voice came through, quiet, but resolute. "I'm ready to talk," she said. "And I have something you should see." The pieces of my plan were falling into place, one by one. I just needed to be patient for a little longer. The quarterly board meeting of the firm was scheduled for 10 a.m. on a rainy Tuesday in September. He had founded the company 12 years ago, building it from a small operation into one of Seattle's most respected wealth management firms. This particular meeting would feature his presentation on the Meridian acquisition, the crowning achievement of his career. I knew this because he had been working obsessively on the presentation for weeks, often muttering to himself about sealing the deal and career-defining moment. He had no idea. I was aware of what he was planning, and that I had prepared a surprise of my own. That meeting 2 days earlier had been illuminating. After our initial conversation at the hotel bar, she'd done her own investigation and discovered he had been using her in exactly the way I'd suggested. Worse, she found evidence that he'd been manipulating stock through unofficial channels, actions that crossed the line from unethical to illegal. "I brought you these," she said, sliding a USB drive across the cafe table, emails, recorded conversations, documents he had asked her to borrow from secured servers. "I was stupid," she admitted. "I believed everything he told me." "We both did," I replied, pocketing the drive. "The difference is we're not stupid anymore." That morning, as he knotted his lucky tie, the one he wore for all important presentations, I kissed him on the cheek. "Good luck today," I said sweetly. He looked surprised by the gesture but pleased. "Thanks. It means a lot that you're being supportive, considering everything." "Well, this is a big day for you," I replied. "I wouldn't want to miss it." Confusion flickered across his face. "Miss it? You're not attending the board meeting." I smiled. "Actually, I am. Don't worry about picking me up, I have some errands to run first. I'll meet you there." Before he could respond, I walked out, leaving him staring after me with growing unease. At 9:45 a.m., I entered the building in a tailored black suit that radiated confidence and authority. The receptionist recognized me immediately. "It's been too long since we've seen you here." "Thanks," I replied. "I believe they're expecting me in the boardroom." "Yes. Shall I escort you?" "No need. I remember the way." As I walked through the familiar corridors, employees greeted me with surprised smiles. I'd been a regular presence in the early days of the company, before he'd suggested it was more professional if I stayed away. The boardroom was already half full when I arrived, board members and executives mingling, coffee cups in hand. He was at the far end, deep in conversation with the company's general counsel. When he spotted me, his fake smile faltered for just a second before he recovered, excusing himself to approach. "What are you doing here?" he hissed under his breath, maintaining his public smile. "Supporting my husband," I replied, loudly enough for nearby board members to hear. "I wouldn't miss this for the world." He gripped my elbow, steering me toward a quiet corner. "This isn't the time or place for whatever you're planning." "Planning? I'm just here to watch your big presentation," I said with a smile that never wavered. "Unless there's some reason you don't want me here." Before he could respond, the chairman called the meeting to order. He was forced to take his seat at the table while I sat in one of the chairs along the wall, poised and attentive. The first hour proceeded normally: financial reports, market analyses, projections for the coming quarter. He grew visibly more relaxed as the meeting progressed without incident, occasionally glancing my way with diminishing concern. Finally, the chairman turned to him. "Now, I believe there's a special presentation regarding a potential acquisition opportunity." He stood, confident and in his element, clicking to his first PowerPoint slide. "Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm excited to present a unique opportunity to acquire a growing firm at a significant discount to market value." For the next 20 minutes, he outlined the proposal, the financials, the strategic advantages, the insider knowledge that gave the company an edge. He was charismatic, persuasive, completely in command. The board members nodded appreciatively, clearly impressed. "In conclusion," he said, "this acquisition represents not just a sound financial decision, but a transformative opportunity to expand into new markets with minimal risk." A smattering of applause followed. The chairman smiled broadly. "Very impressive. Before we move to questions, I believe your wife has requested a moment to address the board. As a significant shareholder in the company, We've granted her request. His head snapped toward me, alarm spreading across his face like wildfire. Thank you, I said, rising from my seat and moving to the front of the room. I connected my laptop to the projector, calmly replacing his presentation with my own. As a spouse, and as mentioned, a significant shareholder in this company, I feel obligated to bring some concerning information to the board's attention before any decision is made regarding the acquisition. The first slide appeared, emails between him and someone inside the firm discussing confidential information. What you're looking at is evidence of corporate espionage and insider trading, I said calmly. He has been obtaining confidential information through an inappropriate relationship with an employee. Gasps echoed around the table. He half rose from his chair. This is ridiculous. She's clearly trying to. Please let me finish, I interrupted smoothly. I have documented evidence of at least 17 instances where non-public information was used to position this company advantageously prior to this acquisition attempt. I clicked through to the next slides, bank transfers, recorded conversations, the documents that had been provided. Furthermore, the SEC has been provided with this same information as of 8 a.m. this morning. I continued, watching the color drain from his face. The general counsel leaned forward. These are extremely serious allegations. They're not allegations, I corrected. They're documented facts. And I believe they expose this company to significant legal and financial risk. I turned to face the stunned board members directly. I'm not here to destroy what's been built. I'm here to protect it, and all of you, from increasingly reckless behavior. He finally found his voice. This is absurd. She's making this up because of personal issues between us. Personal issues. I raised an eyebrow. You mean the affair with the employee who provided you with this insider information? The affair funded with company resources. I clicked to another slide showing expense reports, hotel charges, gifts, all billed to the company. The room fell silent. He looked around desperately, finding no allies among the shocked faces. I move that we suspend this acquisition discussion pending a full internal investigation, said one of the older board members, breaking the silence. Seconded, said another immediately. The chairman cleared his throat. I think you should step out while the board discusses this matter privately. This is my company, he protested, desperation edging into his voice. A company with shareholders, legal obligations, and a reputation to protect, the chairman replied firmly. Please wait outside. As he stormed out, throwing me a look of pure hatred, I gathered my things calmly. Do you have copies of all this documentation? The general counsel asked as I prepared to leave. I handed over sealed envelope. Everything's in here. I suggest you review it quickly. The SEC won't wait long. Walking out of that boardroom was the most powerful moment of my life. In the hallway, he stood waiting, his face contorted with rage. You've destroyed everything, he hissed as I approached. Was this your plan all along? To humiliate me? Ruin me? I stopped, considering him with a calm I genuinely felt. No. This was your plan. You destroyed everything the moment you decided to lie, to me, to her, to the board, to yourself. I just made sure you couldn't take everyone else down with you. They'll never prove anything, he said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. I smiled slightly. She kept records of everything. She's cooperating fully with the SEC. It's over. As I walked away, he called after me, his voice breaking. You can't just leave. We need to talk about this. I turned back one last time. We're beyond talking. Check your email. My lawyer will be in touch about the divorce. Don't come home tonight. Or ever again. The rain had stopped when I stepped outside, the sun breaking through the clouds. I took a deep breath of fresh air, feeling lighter than I had in months. My phone buzzed with a text. Just got word from my contact at the SEC. They're moving forward with the investigation. You did it. I slid into my car, looking back at the company building where his career was imploding in real time. I felt no joy in his destruction, only relief that this chapter of my life was finally closing. As I drove away, I realized I was smiling. Not because of what I'd done to him, but because of what I'd done for myself. I'd reclaimed my power, my dignity, and my future. And that was worth everything. 6 months later, I sat on the balcony of my new apartment overlooking Puget Sound, sipping morning coffee and watching ferry boats cross the water in the early light. The divorce had been finalized 3 weeks earlier. Quick by normal standards, but he had been in no position to contest anything once the SEC investigation began in earnest. The headlines had been brutal. Financial founder faces SEC charges in insider trading scandal. Double life, affairs, espionage, and fraud. CEO steps down amid federal investigation. I avoided the media frenzy as much as possible, declining all interview requests and keeping a low profile. There was no satisfaction in watching his public humiliation, only a quiet vindication that the truth had finally prevailed. The terms of our divorce settlement were more than fair. I took only what was legally mine, half our marital assets, minus the funds he'd spent on her, plus a small ownership stake in the company, which was now being run by the board until a permanent CEO could be appointed. He himself was facing multiple federal charges and had been released on bail pending trial. According to mutual friends, he'd aged a decade in 6 months, haunted, diminished, a shadow of the confident man I'd married. I felt strange thinking about him now. Not with the searing pain of betrayal, but with a detached sort of sadness, for what could have been, for what we'd lost, for who I'd thought he was. My phone chimed with a text. Just finished my SEC deposition. Thought you should know, they offered me immunity for full cooperation. It's finally over. She and I had developed an unlikely alliance through this ordeal. Not friendship exactly, but a bond forged in the crucible of shared betrayal. She'd moved to Chicago to start fresh, and I wished her well. I texted back, "Congratulations. Time for both of us to move forward." Moving forward, that had been my mantra these past months. Not forgetting. Not pretending the pain hadn't happened. But refusing to let it define my future. I'd started consulting for small investment firms, using my financial background in ways that felt meaningful. I'd reconnected with old friends, started painting again, a passion I'd abandoned years ago when he suggested it was just a hobby. Last week, I even agreed to dinner with a literature professor I met at a gallery opening. The evening had been pleasant, comfortable, not earth-shattering romance, but a gentle reminder that my heart wasn't permanently closed. My therapist said that was progress. She'd been helping me understand that what happened wasn't a reflection of my worth, but of his character flaws. Some days, I believed her. Some days, the doubt still crept in. A gentle knock on my door interrupted my thoughts. It was the delivery I'd been waiting for. A package containing my new business cards. I opened the box and ran my finger over the embossed letters. Financial ethics consultant. The irony wasn't lost on me. From betrayed wife to ethics consultant, life had a strange way of creating purpose from pain. My phone rang. It was my friend calling with updates on the final legal loose ends. As I answered, I caught my reflection in the window glass. The woman looking back at me wasn't the same person who had sent that fateful note in the restaurant. She was stronger, wiser, more self-possessed. She had weathered a storm that should have broken her, and instead had been forged by it. That evening, I wrote a letter I never intended to send. I've been thinking about that night at the restaurant. How something as simple as a note on a piece of paper could break open the elaborate deception we were both living in, you, in your affair. Me, in my illusion of a faithful marriage. I don't hate you anymore. Hatred requires an investment of emotion I'm no longer willing to make where you're concerned. Instead, I've come to see our ending as inevitable, not because love can't last, but because what we had wasn't really love at all. It was a performance. A transaction. A habit. Real love doesn't require lies. It doesn't hide in hotel rooms or secret bank accounts. It stands in the light, imperfect, but honest. I hope someday you find that kind of love. I hope someday I do too. The strangest part of all this is that I should thank you. Your betrayal forced me to find a strength in myself I never knew existed. It pushed me to rebuild my life on my terms, not yours or anyone else's. So I guess what I'm saying is, that note I sent you changed both our lives forever. And despite everything, I wouldn't take it back. Goodbye. I folded the letter and placed it in my desk drawer, a final act of closure. Outside, the lights of the city twinkled to life as dusk settled over the water. I wrapped a throw blanket around my shoulders and watched the sky turn from purple to deep blue, then to star-studded black. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in years, I was truly excited to find out. The woman who had once defined herself by someone else's last name was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone who had learned that sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is simply tell the truth. and send a note that completely changes everything. So yeah, that was my story. I never thought a simple note at a restaurant would be the start of everything falling apart, but also everything finally falling into place. It hurt. A lot. But in the end, I found myself again. And honestly, that's what matters most. If you've ever been through something like this, just know you're stronger than you think. Thanks for listening. If this story moved you, give it a like, subscribe, and stick around. There are more real stories coming your way. Take care of yourself. I'll see you in the next